The rusty chain clinked against worn metal, a sound that had become the heartbeat of Rex's existence in rural Tennessee. The German Shepherd's once proud frame was now a shadow of its former self, his golden eyes dimmed by years of neglect, yet still holding on to a flicker of hope. For 5 long years, this small patch of dirt behind a dilapidated shed had been his entire world. His prison under the open sky, where each day blended into the next in an endless cycle of solitude and suffering. The property itself told a story of despair. Peeling paint flaking off the weathered siding, broken windows covered with makeshift cardboard patches, and an overgrown yard that seemed to devour everything in its path. Frank, Rex's elderly owner, had withdrawn from life after losing his beloved wife Marie to cancer, and in his descent into grief-stricken depression, he had dragged Rex down with him, leaving the dog chained and forgotten behind the crumbling shed. Each sunrise brought the same routine. Rex would watch the world awaken through his limited view between the shed and an ancient oak tree, its branches casting shifting shadows across his small territory. The chain, barely long enough for him to lie down comfortably, had worn a perfect circle in the dirt beneath his paws, a testament to countless days of pacing. His water bowl, when filled, was often frozen in winter and tepid in summer, while meals came sporadically at Frank's whim. Sarah Chen noticed Rex on her first day driving to her new job at Riverside Veterinary Clinic, the sight of his dejected figure causing her to nearly miss her turn. Something in those golden eyes caught her attention, a spark of intelligence and resilience that refused to be extinguished despite years of neglect. From that moment on, she couldn't help but slow down each time she passed, her heart growing heavier with each glimpse of his imprisoned existence. The neighbors spoke in whispers about Rex's history, how he had once been a vibrant puppy, brought home as a companion for Marie during her final months. They remembered him racing through the yard, his tail wagging with unbridled joy as he played fetch with the couple. Those memories made his current state even more heartbreaking, as he had transformed from a beloved family member into a living ghost, chained to the past just as surely as he was chained to the ground. Local animal control had visited multiple times, their hands tied by legal technicalities that Frank barely managed to satisfy. The chain met minimum length requirements by mere inches, and he would make just enough improvements when worn to avoid serious intervention. It was a cruel dance of bureaucracy that left Rex trapped in limbo, technically cared for by legal standards, but suffering in ways that no law seemed equipped to address. On particularly cold nights, Rex's howls would pierce the darkness, a haunting reminder of his isolation that echoed through the neighborhood. Some residents would secretly leave food by the fence when they could, but none dared to do more, fearing Frank's increasingly volatile temper. The chain had left its mark not just on Rex's body, where it had worn a permanent ring of scarred flesh around his neck, but on the conscience of an entire community. Sarah began documenting everything she witnessed, taking photos with her phone, noting dates and temperatures, and recording the conditions Rex endured day after day. She reached out to every rescue organization within a 100-mile radius, but most were overwhelmed with their own cases. Still, she refused to give up, knowing that each passing day meant another day of suffering for a dog who had done nothing to deserve such a fate. The local coffee shop became Sarah's unofficial headquarters as she built her case for Rex's rescue. She would spend hours after her shifts at the clinic researching legal options and connecting with animal welfare advocates online. Her determination began to draw attention from other patrons, and slowly a small group of concerned citizens started to gather around her cause, sharing her vision of freedom for the forgotten shepherd. That winter proved particularly brutal, with temperatures plummeting well below freezing. Sarah now drove by twice daily, her car loaded with straw and extra blankets that she would toss over the fence when Frank wasn't watching. She prayed these small acts of kindness would provide some comfort to Rex in his exposed position, though she knew it wasn't nearly enough to make up for the years of neglect he had endured. The chain's constant rattling had become a sound that haunted Sarah's dreams, mixing with the memory of Rex's eyes watching her drive past each day. She began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. how he would perk up slightly at the sound of her car, how his tail would give the faintest wag when she slowed down. These small signs of recognition only strengthened her resolve to find a way to free him from his metal bonds. Through her work at the clinic, Sarah had seen countless cases of animal neglect, but something about Rex's situation struck a deeper chord. Perhaps it was the way he maintained his dignity despite his circumstances, or how his eyes still held a glimmer of trust in humanity despite years of disappointment. Whatever the reason, she knew with absolute certainty that she had been meant to find him, to be the voice he so desperately needed. The transformation in the neighborhood's attitude was gradual but significant. As more people learned about Rex's situation through Sarah's advocacy, they began to speak up rather than look away. Anonymous letters appeared in Frank's mailbox, some pleading, others demanding change. The local paper ran a story about chained dogs and their suffering, though they couldn't name Rex specifically for legal reasons. Messages of support started flowing in from across the country as Sarah's social media posts about Rex gained traction. People offered donations, legal advice, and even sanctuary for Rex if he could be freed. The spotlight on Frank's property grew brighter with each passing day, and with it, the pressure to make a change. What had begun as one woman's mission was slowly transforming into a movement, with Rex's chain becoming a symbol of both captivity and hope. Sarah's determination reached a breaking point one frigid morning when she found Rex lying motionless in the snow, his chain twisted around his legs. Her heart stopped as she pulled over, jumping out of her car without even turning off the engine. As she approached the fence, Rex lifted his head weakly, his breath visible in the freezing air. The sight of his suffering finally pushed her to take action that would change both their lives forever. Frank's reaction to Sarah's presence on his property was explosive. He burst out of his house, face red with anger, shouting threats about trespassing and calling the police. But Sarah stood her ground, her veterinary credentials in one hand and a thick folder of documentation in the other. The confrontation that followed would reveal layers of pain and grief that had been festering for years beneath the surface of this tragic situation. The chain around Rex's neck had begun to embed itself into his flesh, creating infected wounds that were hidden beneath his matted fur. Sarah could see him shivering constantly now, his body mass having dropped to a dangerous level as the winter wore on. His paw pads were cracked and bleeding from standing on frozen ground, and his once thick coat had become thin and patchy, offering little protection against the elements. Local law enforcement had been hesitant to intervene, citing the complex nature of property rights and animal welfare laws. Officer Jim Martinez, however, was different. He had known Marie before her passing and remembered how much she had loved Rex. When Sarah presented him with her evidence, including detailed veterinary assessments of Rex's declining health, he finally agreed that something had to be done. The community's reaction to Rex's situation had evolved from whispered concern to outright anger. Social media posts about his plight had gone viral, drawing attention from national animal welfare organizations. News vans began appearing on the street, their presence adding to the growing pressure on local authorities to take action. Frank's property had become ground zero for a battle between animal rights activists and property rights advocates. As temperatures continued to plummet, Sarah observed Rex's condition deteriorating rapidly. His once alert ears now drooped, and his golden eyes had developed a concerning cloudiness that suggested underlying health issues. Even more alarming were the periods when he would seem to give up entirely, lying motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest, as if accepting that this might be his fate. Frank's own health had begun to decline noticeably during this period. Neighbors reported seeing him wandering his yard at odd hours, talking to himself, and occasionally to Marie's ghost. His hostile outbursts became more frequent and irrational, suggesting that his mental state was deteriorating alongside Rex's physical condition. The situation had become dangerous for both man and dog. Hope's Haven Rescue Organization had finally taken notice of Sarah's persistent advocacy and sent their legal team to assess the situation. They discovered that Frank had failed to provide proper veterinary care for Rex for over 3 years, a violation of state law that required annual examinations and vaccinations. This legal oversight became the key that could potentially unlock Rex's chains. The rescue team's investigation revealed more disturbing details about Rex's living conditions. The area where he was chained frequently flooded during rainstorms, leaving him standing in contaminated water for hours. His food bowl, when filled, attracted rats and other vermin, creating a health hazard that violated multiple county ordinances. The documentation of these conditions strengthened the case for immediate intervention. Sarah's professional reputation at the veterinary clinic had begun to suffer as she devoted more and more time to Rex's cause. Her colleagues supported her mission, but worried about her growing obsession with the case. She had started taking longer routes to and from work, making multiple passes by Frank's property throughout the day, unable to shake the feeling that each moment could be critical in Rex's struggle for survival. The chain itself had become a symbol of cruelty that divided the community. Some defended Frank, citing his age and grief as mitigating factors, while others demanded immediate action to free Rex. The local newspaper ran daily updates on the situation, featuring heated debates in their letters section. The controversy had grown far beyond a simple case of animal welfare into a broader discussion of morality and responsibility. One particularly devastating morning, Sarah arrived to find Rex's water bowl completely frozen and knocked over, with no sign that it had been refilled in days. The temperature had dropped to record lows overnight, and Rex's breathing appeared labored. His eyes, which usually tracked her movements, remained unfocused and distant. Time was running out, and Sarah knew she needed to act before it was too late. The turning point came when Frank was hospitalized for a mental health evaluation after a public outburst at the local grocery store. His absence created both an opportunity and a crisis. Rex was now completely abandoned, with no one legally authorized to care for him. Sarah and the rescue team realized this could be their chance to save him, but they would have to navigate complex legal and ethical considerations to do so. Frank's hospitalization revealed a tragic parallel between his own imprisonment by grief and Rex's physical captivity. Medical records showed that he had been struggling with severe depression and dementia, conditions that had gone untreated while he isolated himself from the world. The chain binding Rex to the property had become a manifestation of the emotional chains that held Frank captive to his past. The night that changed everything arrived during the worst blizzard Tennessee had seen in decades. Wind howled through the trees, driving snow and ice sideways with brutal force. Sarah, who had been keeping vigil from her car across the street, watched in horror as the ancient oak tree near Rex's chain began to sway dangerously in the wind. She knew that waiting even one more night could mean the difference between life and death for the desperate dog. With Frank still in the hospital and a state of emergency declared due to the storm, Sarah finally had legal grounds to act. She called Officer Martinez, who had become a quiet ally in her mission to save Rex. The howling wind nearly drowned out their conversation, but his words came through clearly. "Do what you need to do. I'll handle the paperwork." Those 7 words would set in motion a chain of events that would change multiple lives forever. Sarah had assembled a rescue team that stood ready. Dr. Thompson from her veterinary clinic, 2 experienced handlers from Hope's Haven, and a locksmith who had volunteered his services after seeing Rex's story on the local news. They gathered in the strengthening storm, their flashlights cutting through the swirling snow as they approached the property. The moment of truth had arrived, and there would be no turning back. The chain, frozen solid and crusted with ice, had become a deadly trap. Rex lay huddled against the shed, his body nearly covered in snow. As Sarah approached, his tail gave the faintest thump of recognition, but he didn't lift his head. Years of neglect and exposure had taken their toll, and the team knew they were working against time. The locksmith's hands shook with cold as he worked on the heavy padlock that secured Rex's chain. A sound like a gunshot rang out as the ancient oak finally surrendered to the storm's fury. A massive branch crashed down mere feet from where Rex lay tethered, sending the rescue team scrambling for safety. In that heart-stopping moment, Sarah didn't think, she acted. Grabbing the bolt cutters from her emergency kit, she cut through Rex's chain in one desperate motion, freeing him seconds before another branch crashed onto his former prison. The moment the chain fell away, something remarkable happened. Despite his weakness, Rex struggled to his feet, shaking off years of captivity like the snow from his coat. His eyes, which had been so dull and distant, suddenly focused with newfound clarity. He took one tentative step towards Sarah, then another, until he pressed his frozen body against her legs in a gesture of absolute trust that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Dr. Thompson's initial examination by flashlight revealed the full extent of Rex's condition. Severe malnutrition had weakened his muscles, and the embedded chain had caused deep tissue damage around his neck. Frostbite threatened his ears and paw pads, and his temperature was dangerously low. But beneath all the damage, his heart beat strong with a warrior's spirit that had refused to give up through all the years of neglect. The journey to the emergency veterinary hospital was tense, with Sarah cradling Rex's head in her lap while Dr. Thompson monitored his vital signs. The storm raged outside, but inside the vehicle, a profound silence held as this small group of rescuers witnessed the first moments of freedom for a dog who had known nothing but chains for 5 long years. Every few minutes, Rex would lift his head slightly, as if making sure Sarah was still there. Officer Martinez met them at the hospital, having already prepared the necessary documentation to legally transfer Rex into the care of Hope's Haven. His eyes were suspiciously moist as he watched the medical team rush Rex into treatment, and he placed a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "doing the right thing means breaking a few chains, both literal and figurative." The veterinary team worked through the night, addressing Rex's immediate medical needs while documenting every injury and condition for the legal case that would surely follow. X-rays revealed old fractures that had healed poorly, and blood tests showed several underlying health issues that would require long-term treatment. Yet through it all, Rex remained gentle and trusting, as if he somehow understood that his nightmare was finally over. News of Rex's rescue spread quickly through social media, capturing hearts across the country. Videos of the moment he was freed went viral, showing him taking his first unchained steps in the snow. Support poured in from everywhere: donations for his medical care, offers of rehabilitation services, and messages of encouragement from people touched by his story. The chain that had bound him had become a powerful symbol of breaking free from life's constraints. The most unexpected development came from the hospital where Frank was being treated. His doctors reported that seeing the news coverage of Rex's rescue had triggered a breakthrough in his therapy. The sight of the dog he had imprisoned breaking free seemed to unlock something in his own mind, helping him begin to break free from the chains of his grief and mental illness that had held him captive for so long. Frank's social worker reached out to Sarah with an extraordinary request. Frank wanted to meet with her, not to demand Rex's return or to press charges, but to thank her. In his moments of clarity, he had begun to understand how his own pain had caused him to inflict suffering on an innocent creature. The chain that had bound Rex had also bound Frank to his past, and now they were both taking their first steps toward healing. The first weeks of Rex's recovery were a delicate balance of physical and emotional healing. In the comfort of the veterinary hospital's intensive care unit, he began to understand that the constant weight around his neck was truly gone. The staff observed with joy as small changes appeared day by day, the way he would tentatively stretch his neck, testing its new freedom, or how his eyes would light up when Sarah arrived for her daily visits. Each small victory was celebrated as a step toward his new life. Physical therapy became a crucial part of Rex's rehabilitation. Years of restricted movement had weakened his muscles and compromised his joints, requiring gentle exercises to rebuild his strength. The therapists were amazed by his determination. Despite the pain and difficulty, Rex approached each session with unwavering trust and effort. His resilient spirit became an inspiration to everyone involved in his care. Sarah had taken a leave of absence from work to dedicate herself to Rex's recovery. She spent hours sitting beside his bed, reading to him, talking softly, and simply being present. The bond between them grew stronger each day, built on a foundation of trust that had begun with those first glimpses through a car window. Rex's tail, once lifeless, now wagged with increasing enthusiasm whenever she entered the room. The removal of the embedded chain revealed severe tissue damage that required multiple surgeries. Dr. Thompson and his team worked meticulously to repair the physical trauma, but they were equally focused on healing the psychological wounds. They noticed how Rex would sometimes freeze in fear at the sound of metal clinking, or how he would panic if anything touched his neck. Each reaction was met with patience and gentle reassurance. Hope's Haven had converted their main rehabilitation area into a special space for Rex, complete with soft bedding, toys, and large windows that allowed natural light to flood in. After 3 weeks in the hospital, he was strong enough to be transferred to this nurturing environment. The contrast between his former life and his new surroundings was stark. Where once there had been only mud and cold, now there was warmth and comfort. The community's support continued to grow as Rex's story touched more hearts. Local businesses organized fundraisers for his ongoing care, schoolchildren sent hand-drawn pictures and letters, and other rescue organizations reached out to learn from his case. The chain that had bound him was transformed into a powerful teaching tool, displayed at awareness events as a symbol of both cruelty and hope. Rex's first steps on grass marked a profound moment in his journey. After years of pacing on bare dirt, he seemed unsure of the soft ground beneath his paws. Sarah and the rehab team watched with tears in their eyes as he gradually began to explore, sniffing the air and feeling the texture of this new world. His curiosity, buried for so long, began to emerge like a flower reaching for the sun. The most remarkable transformation was in Rex's relationship with other dogs. Initially fearful and withdrawn, he slowly began to show interest in the other residents at Hope's Haven. A gentle senior golden retriever named Luna became his first friend, showing him how to play and sharing her toys. Their interactions helped Rex remember how to be a dog again, free from the isolation that had defined his existence. Frank's recovery paralleled Rex's in unexpected ways. Through therapy and medication, he began to process his grief and mental health challenges. He requested updates on Rex's progress and sent a heartfelt letter acknowledging his failures and expressing gratitude for Sarah's intervention. The healing taking place was not just physical, but reached across species to touch human hearts as well. As spring arrived, Rex's transformation became even more evident. His coat, now properly nourished and groomed, regained its lustrous sheen. The fearful, withdrawn dog was replaced by one who greeted each day with growing confidence. He learned to play with toys, discovered the joy of running freely in the exercise yard, and even began to bark playfully, a sound that brought happy tears to his caretaker's eyes. The legal case surrounding Rex's rescue concluded with unexpected grace. Frank, continuing his own journey of healing, voluntarily surrendered all rights to Rex and made a public statement about the importance of proper animal care. His testimony, combined with Rex's documented recovery, led to stricter local ordinances regarding chained dogs. Rex's suffering had sparked changes that would protect other animals from similar fate. Sarah's decision to adopt Rex was celebrated by everyone who had followed his journey. The home visit revealed a space carefully prepared for his needs, a fenced yard full of soft grass, a cozy bed by a sunny window, and most importantly, an abundance of love. The day he walked through her front door, tail wagging and eyes bright, marked the final chapter of his transformation from prisoner to cherished family member. Their first night together set the tone for their new life. Rex, who had spent countless nights alone in the cold, now curled up on his bed next to Sarah's, sighing contentedly in the warm darkness. The sound of his peaceful breathing replaced the haunting memory of rattling chains, a testament to the healing power of love and second chances. Local media covered Rex's one-year anniversary of freedom with a special feature that brought his story full circle. The footage showed him running joyfully through Sarah's yard, playing with his canine friends, and giving gentle kisses to children at education events. The once imprisoned dog had become an ambassador of hope, his journey inspiring others to take action against animal cruelty in their own communities. Rex's journey from a chained existence to a life full of love serves as a powerful reminder of the resilience of the spirit. His story isn't just about the physical breaking of chains, but about the transformative power of compassion and determination. In the years since his rescue, hundreds of other dogs have been freed from similar situations, their liberations inspired by the golden-eyed shepherd who never lost his capacity to trust and love. The ripple effects of Rex's rescue continue to spread. The local ordinances passed in his name, now known as Rex's Law, have been adopted by counties across Tennessee and beyond. Sarah regularly receives messages from animal advocates who have used his story to push for change in their own communities. What began as one woman's mission to save a single dog has evolved into a movement that continues to break chains, both literal and metaphorical. Perhaps the most profound legacy of Rex's story is the bridge it built between human and animal healing. Frank, who eventually became an advocate for mental health awareness and responsible pet ownership, often speaks about how saving Rex ultimately saved him too. His testimony about the parallel between his emotional chains and Rex's physical ones has helped others recognize and seek help for their own struggles with grief and mental health. Today, Rex spends his days as a certified therapy dog, visiting hospitals, schools, and rehabilitation centers. The dog who once couldn't move more than a few feet now brings comfort and hope to those facing their own challenges. Children who hear his story learn valuable lessons about perseverance, compassion, and the importance of speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves. The chain that once bound Rex has been transformed into a powerful symbol of hope. Mounted on a plaque at Hope's Haven's entrance, it serves as a reminder that no situation is too desperate to change. Each link represents the countless individuals who came together to save one dog, proving that when compassion meets action, miraculous transformations are possible. Rex's golden eyes now shine with the light of freedom, inspiring others to break whatever chains hold them back. In the end, Rex's story teaches us that sometimes the greatest acts of love require the courage to take action in the face of adversity. His journey from prisoner to beloved family member reminds us that every life has value and that it's never too late for a new beginning. The former prisoner has become a teacher, showing us all that with love, patience, and determination, any chain, physical or emotional, can be broken, leading to a life of freedom, purpose, and joy.